You're listening to Gearing Up, an Everyday Carry podcast, a show that's made for the community, featuring interviews with makers, creators, and members of the community, and discussions on current trends in the industry. Follow along as we talk about life, gear, hobbies, and more. And be sure to stay tuned for new episodes every week. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Thank you guys again for checking it out. If you missed it, we just recently hit 10,000 downloads, so I'm stoked about that. Today, I am joined by Mr. Positivity. You guys know him as Ben Banters, Ben Petersen, Knafs.com. You know him for BladeHQ. He was such a blast to talk to. I hope you guys enjoy our chat, and thank you again to the sponsor of this episode, Novel Carry. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Gearing Up. Today, I am joined by another awesome guest in this awesome season 4 we've had so far. Hopefully, you guys are loving it. When I went to come up with an introduction or a title or a name, I was kind of at a loss for words. So I'm going to lean on you a little bit. Today, I'm joined by Ben Petersen, aka Ben Banters. And Ben, when I first, I was like, so do I refer to him as a knife industry enthusiast, a knife industry personality, and knife designer is now also in the title. So I'll ask you, title wise, what do you prefer?
I just like Ben, man. I don't know. Like what am I? I'm this dude that's kicked around the industry for a few years, and here I am. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. So Ben is great.
Ben, all right, simple enough. I like that. So for those that don't know, Ben is, and Ben, you're gonna fill in some of these gaps that I'm leaving. But Ben, I found out about you through BladeHQ and their outstanding online presence, which I know you played a big role in. And then now I follow your Ben Banter's account, and I've been keeping an eye on the knife that you designed and put out with WE Knives. And so, like you said, you've been kind of bouncing around the industry, but I mean, you've just been doing some really, really cool stuff. So thank you again for
Thanks.
jumping on. I'm really excited to have you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Greg. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to not waste any time. I really wanted to kind of go back to the beginning. My first question is super, super general, but really I kind of wanted to know a little bit about your background, a little bit about where you came from and all of that. So, a sort of an abbreviated bio of Ben. So, how much ever you want to share, right? Just
Sure.
tell me a little bit about you, where you came from and where you are and how you ended up there and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of my history it's interesting because I was never like a huge knife guy growing up. Like I owned a couple Swiss Army knives, and I had this really cool like a dagger blade that my grandpa bought me after a fishing trip.
Yeah.
So like every kid loves they just love knives, right? So I was into them in that sense, but like there wasn't really a community when I was growing up as far as I knew. So I grew up in a small town and then ended up moving kind of to the Provo area to go to school here in Utah. And I got married, and I'm going to school for broadcast journalism and film. I'd always loved video. So all through high school, I'd done like video production, and this is like in the mid 2000s. And so I'm like sitting in my basement pounding my head against like early digital video technology.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because I was on this kind of like front end of do it yourself video production, which was just really fantastic. So I just had this real passion for video. And I go to school, I'm studying broadcast journalism, I get married. So broadcast journalism and film. I'm majoring in broadcast, minoring in film. And I get about 3/4 of the way through my degree, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yeah,
this
no, 100%.
existential crisis. Like, I've just dumped all this time and money into this
Listen,
degree.
you got further than a lot of people do before they ask that question. So, I mean, my hat's off to you there.
Well, and so I'm 3/4 of the way through school. I'm married. This was probably about the time our first kid was on the way, and I'm like, what am I doing? Um, because I didn't want to go into broadcast because they work crazy hours. They work Christmas. I didn't want to go into film because they work whenever there's money, which is fine. Everybody's got to do that. But I'm like, 18-hour days, right,
Yeah.
doing film stuff, and I'm like, nah, I gotta do something different. So it just so happened at the time that YouTube was taking off, and I was at a family party talking to my wife's cousin's husband. So like random extended family. I'm like, "What do you
Sure.
do for work?" And he's like, "I sell knives on the internet." I'm like, "That's really random, but do you run video on your website?" Because I'm thinking like I don't want to be in the film industry, don't want to be in the broadcast industry. So I'm like, well, maybe I could do internet marketing, with video.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, I'm like, do you have video on your website? He's like, no, but we want to because one of our competitors is doing it. Well, it
Ooh.
turned out that this was one of the owners of BladeHQ, Jim Brown, and he's my wife's cousin's husband. And so they brought me on at BladeHQ my last year of college to just try out YouTube stuff.
Nice.
And
Okay.
I was just like, cool, college job. I don't know what I'm doing, but hey, this is a good spot to just like get my feet wet and actually do some like professional video.
Yeah.
And so I got into it and I'm like, wow, there's a community here, there's an industry here. And here I am, what, 9 years later,
Yeah.
uh, kind of still kicking around the knife industry. So it's it's been a really cool experience, a really fun experience. And I never thought in all my days like I'd be in it this long. I kind of found a place that I really enjoy, and here I am.
Yeah. I mean that it's so right place, right time. You hear that a lot. Especially with some of the folks that I've talked to. It's I knew the right guy, met the right guy, felt it was the right situation, whatever the case. So that's insanely cool to hear that it was just kind of this weird extended um, you know, second cousin to like that idea that there's like someone kind of close to you but not
Yeah.
and that it's to me it's strange how like those paths kind of open up and present themselves to you, so that's really cool that happened for you. So I wanted to talk about how you got into Blade HQ, but I remembered I was watching some old videos and I remembered you talking about doing it in college, and so I wasn't sure what came first. But you were at Blade HQ, so you started your last year in college. How long were you there before you left?
So I was there from 2011. Started at like $13 an hour or something,
Hmm.
like just like cheapo college job, and then I was there until August of 2013.
Okay.
And at that point, my wife and I had kind of decided it was time to move on. So I wanted to stay in the knife industry. I just kind of saw a cool opportunity, and so I networked around the knife industry and actually ended up at CRKT. And so we
Yeah.
actually uprooted, moved to Oregon, and I was at CRKT for about 3 years. And just a totally different experience, but also just a really fantastic experience in its own right. So I kind of expanded from just doing video at BladeHQ into doing all sorts of digital marketing for um, CRKT.
Right on. Okay. And so was there you know correct me if I'm wrong here. It sounded to me like when you jumped on Blade HQ, they weren't doing it. You kind of, I mean, you really brought in um, the whole era of video for them, and what is now sort of a huge piece of, like I said, I found you from Blade HQ, YouTube. I'm pretty sure that an episode of Knife Banter or something was where I first found you. Um, so that must have been huge, right? I mean, and it's
Yeah,
crazy.
so
Go
so
ahead.
I always give credit to BladeOps. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
Hmm.
they're a competitor to BladeHQ, and they had this YouTube channel where they were just crushing it.
Yeah.
And so they're local here in Utah, and BladeHQ, the guys at BladeHQ are like, gosh, we gotta react to this, right? And so they brought me on to start competing with BladeOps. So in reality, I didn't invent the game. I
Right.
just I just kind of came in with a skill set and like fumbled through the dark enough to be able to figure like no
So
joke, man. There's some weird stuff I've made out there on the Blade HQ YouTube channel. If you go digging,
right.
it's odd stuff. Uh, but eventually I kind of hit my stride and I was able to bring in kind of some personalities like
Uh
Late Boy
huh.
Scout, Crockett 20. Some of these guys were like incredibly helpful at the beginning. Nut and Fancy, we did a video with him.
Uh huh.
And I learned a lot of tricks from him. And So those collaborations were really, really huge in the beginning, and they were a lot of fun too. I kind of started to see this more as a community than just like
Yeah.
me pumping out content, feeding it down people's throats.
And so BladeHQ, did they just say, "Hey, we wanna do video, do your thing?" Did they I mean, how tight was the the leash there?
It was crazy loose.
Okay.
It was kind of like, look, if you really suck, we will probably figure out something else. But go ahead because nobody knows what's and this is like this is the age of like YouTube is just starting to kind of not be cat videos and not be like random
Right.
people jumping off buildings. Like it was just starting to mature a little bit. And so nobody knew what was going on there. So when I started at Blade HQ, I was using my own computer, my own
Mhm.
gear, like um it was just really guerrilla, rough and tumble, no budget, and eventually it started to get traction and they're like, cool, buy a camera. Cool, we'll actually give you a computer. you know?
Mhm.
And it seems so like foreign now.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just like super scrappy, just trying to get through school, just trying to make things happen. And I think if there was a theme for where I've been, it's just like make things happen, shoestring budget, have as much fun as possible, while spending as little of the company money as possible, and seeing as many results as possible.
Yeah, I remember you speaking of spending the company's money, I was like I said, I was watching some old videos, you were talking about taking, like, knives that had come back in from warranty, and all that, so I'm like, "Okay, so there's where he's getting creative with some of this," so
Dude,
interesting.
that's actually fun stuff. So CRKT is funny. A little bit about how their sausage is made. It actually costs them more to fix some of the knives than to just replace them.
Sure.
So like a lot of times they get warranties in, and they're like, well, it's missing this, this, and this, and so just throw it in the scrap bucket and send out a new one, right?
Sure.
Faster, more efficient. Well, I'm looking at the scrap bucket going like, well, that M16 has those screws, like why not Frankenstein them and
Right.
there's a knife. And so I was their content creator, and so I was always out on these photo shoots and stuff. So I just like go back to warranty and be like, hey, Javier worked back there at the time. I'm like, Javier,
Uh-huh.
you got anything like good come in? He's like, hey, check this out. And I'm like, sweet, taking it on a photo shoot. And it's like they're basically going to scrap. And so
Right.
I would take them with me, and usually they wouldn't make them
They'd
home.
I would
They
say
come
they'd
back
never find their way home, right?
to yeah, they found a new
That's
home,
great.
Greg.
That's good. So, okay, so you start really making some progress at Blade HQ. You get the itch to move on. Um, you move and you start working for CRKT, and was it? I know you said it was a little different, but was it like, hey, we see what you're doing there, do more of that? Or I mean, was there more direction there?
It was kind of. I would say definitely my stuff at Blade HQ the first round gave me a foot into the door at
Sure.
CRKT. Like they'd seen it, they understood it. The role at CRKT was a lot more broad. So I was
Hmm.
managing all of their website, like their e-commerce, their email marketing, their Facebook, Instagram. I started their Instagram years
Yeah.
ago. Um, and they kind of had a little bit more structured vision. I mean, they've got this confidence in hand campaign that they've been running forever. They were doing a rebrand at the time, so it was really fun to be part of that.
Yeah.
Sort of this, I'd call it a renaissance at Blade HQ. It was their 20-year anniversary, so they rebranded. They'd hired an agency, and so I kind of got to work with this agency. I got to work with the marketing manager. His name is Joel Bornson. He's amazing.
Hmm.
He was a huge mentor for me. Just like I didn't know Excel at all. I didn't know business at all, and I kind of had Joel like sitting right beside me for 3 years. I'd be like, Joel, like, what does the sum function do in Excel? Like just stupid stuff, right? And
Yeah.
he'd be like, yeah, here's how you do reporting. So I learned a ton from Joel, but they had a much more structured program where
Sure.
they had these product launches, and I think they had to be. They were a little bit more mature than Blade HQ.
Yeah.
They were a few years older and just a little bit more settled into where they were. A lot older, kind of a just more. experienced people there, I think would be the best way to describe it. And so
Yeah.
I kind of got to learn from a lot of really talented people at CRKT, and it was an incredible experience. Like I got to interface with all of these designers. Like I've been to dinner with just about any designer that CRKT's ever worked with. And so I kind of got to sort of be mentored by all these people
Yeah.
as far as knives go. And I think it was a really, really unique experience just because I was creating content. I mean, I spent days with Jesper Voxnays filming with him. You know,
Yeah.
I spent days with Lucas Burnley filming with him, all of these different people. And you really get to kind of hear their philosophies and hear why they do what they do, how they got into it. Like Ken Onion's story is fascinating to me. And you
Yeah.
get to hear it from the horse's mouth, which I think for a lot of people, like you'd have to, it was just a unique situation. I don't think a lot of people get that same experience in this
Right.
industry. So
Yeah, and that's, I think part of that is one of the reasons why you kind of stick out so much. I mean, I think there's other people at other companies doing similar or the same stuff you're doing. But I think you and your personality, your charisma, your presence on screen. Well, and okay, so I'm totally sidetracked here, but so here's another question. You come into BladeHQ to start doing content, and then you go to CRKT to start doing content. Was it ever your intention, goal, desire to be like in videos and to be this personality?
never.
Not that you're a personality. Don't take that the wrong way. But what I
No, no,
mean
no.
is like,
I get it. Yeah.
yeah, when I think of you, I think like I was watching, like I said, some old videos, and I just like I couldn't help but catch myself just grinning ear to ear because you've just got that kind of infectious personality, and so
Because
um,
I'm a weird cat, man. I'll
yeah,
admit it.
well, okay, but yeah, yes, in absolutely the best ways, right? But
Sure.
so I guess my question was, was that ever the goal, and if not, then what happened? How did you wind up in front of the camera?
Can I tell you two stories? Story
Sure.
number one. So I'm studying broadcast and film, and my what I enjoyed about broadcast was the shooting elements, the storytelling, the editing, all of that.
Yeah.
And one day I'm in broadcast class, and there's like no on-screen talent kicking around, and so the professor's like, "Anybody want to be on camera?" And nobody. It was all a bunch of producers, and we're like, "No, not at all." Finally, I'm like, I'll do it. It's fine. I'm wearing like a sweater, like a hoodie. And I go sit on set, and it was just like a practice run of a bunch of stuff. Well, some of these like really professional anchor reporter types were actually using this stuff for their reels,
Oh wow.
this practice stuff. And here I am sitting in my sweater on the desk, like the news desk, like just hanging out, like
Who is
because I
this
could,
guy?
who is this guy? Like I can read a teleprompter, anybody can. But anyway, so I had no desire. I hated my reporting class. There's a wonderful reel out there on the internet from my reporting class. It's internet gold. Someday somebody should dig
Google
it up. Put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Ben. Okay, I start making notes.
I'll send you a link, Greg. It's pretty amazing.
Okay.
I was terrible on camera. I had no desire to do it. The way I got into it was when I got to BladeHQ. I could see it was so clear. Like if there was anything that was clear at BladeHQ is I needed to have people on camera. Like we had to show faces. And so we started with the owner of the company on camera, and he was hard to get a hold of, like just scheduling wise. He's the
Sure.
CEO, like a lot going on. And then so we started with him. We moved on to no, no, actually he was third, I can't remember. Anyway, we ran through three people: the marketing manager, one of the
Mhm.
copywriters, and the owner. And after about two or three episodes of whatever we were taping, uh, they were just getting eaten alive in the comments, and that was not like we didn't have on-screen talent.
Yeah.
And like two or three episodes of them getting eaten in the comments, they're like, I'm out, I'm done. And it was like, well, here I am supposed to be making video, nobody wants to be on camera. I'm like, forget it, I'll just be on camera. And there's a video out there where I actually it was a video for myself. I sat in front of the camera, I taped it, and I'm like, look guys, I'm your new host. Deal with it. You know? And
Take it or leave it.
take it or leave it. I'm like, I'm a 23-year-old punk kid. This is what you get. If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And people liked it. And so I mean, even when I went back to BladeHQ in 2016, I had no intentions of being on camera again. I'd done a little bit at CRKT at trade shows and stuff for
Uh-huh.
booth interviews, but I did not go back thinking I'm going to be on camera and create this persona, this personality. Like that was never on my roadmap, never on my radar. And again, like necessity is the mother of invention, and so
Yeah.
we really like we needed people on camera, and it's as easy as it might look. Being on camera is terrible. Like it's challenging. You have to like be able to control your tongue and your shoulders and your hands and like not look like an idiot. And
Yeah.
so
For me that's tough. That's why I do podcasts.
yeah, and so I had kind of developed these skills over the years, and so it was sort of a natural fit to get back into it when I went back to BladeHQ. But did
Yeah.
I ever set out to do this? No, absolutely not. It was never on my roadmap. Even I didn't have an Instagram account until 2 years ago. I'd been doing this professionally for years, six
Yeah.
years, and I finally was like, well, I'm a thing, so I
Yeah. I'm a
better
thing.
start
I
an
like that.
Instagram.
No,
Like,
you're absolutely right.
yeah, like I'm a house fire. I might as well set up an Instagram account so people can watch it burn, you know?
I love it, man. No, so to me, again, I've said this before, and I said it, I think, in the last one that I recorded that you guys might have heard by now. By the time you're hearing this, I'm recording things in a weird order, but like, just hearing those stories is what's so cool to me. Like, I've just known you as um, previously the Blade HQ Ben, and like I think a lot of people do, and a lot of people still might know you as that, but and
Yeah.
now the Knafs.com Ben, um, but it's cool to hear the stories of how you kind of worked through, um, just creating content and building helping build these brands into what they are, and that's cool to see. And I know you got to work with some really incredible people, especially with CRKT, because they've got some insane collaborations, with some crazy designers and makers and stuff like that. And I know, if I remember correctly, you got to be the, speaking of being on-screen talent when no one was around, isn't that when you like almost sliced your hand off?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I can't imagine.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was crazy, man. I'm glad I have all 10 fingers on both hands.
yeah, so you guys go back and watch one of the old Knife Banter episodes. It like he talks about nobody was around, so you were like chopping with a machete or something and like slice your hand. It was nuts. Anyways, um, to get us back on track. So you were at CRKT for a few years, and then what happened after that?
So I'm at CRKT probably about 2 years,
Hmm.
and I'm one of those people like I get bored, um, and I start getting antsy, and I start looking around, and it's like, what more can I do? What more can I learn?
Sure.
And so I'm looking around CRKT, and the writing's on the wall. Like, there's nowhere to go professionally there. Great company, love the people I worked with, but the reality was like it was going to be like 10 years before there would be an opportunity open up.
Sure.
And I just realized like I'm too early in my career to sit back and just like wait for stuff to happen. I got to keep learning. I got to keep moving.
Right.
And so I had actually decided to go back and get an MBA. So I took the GMAT, like put in the hours, all the craziness with applications and stuff. And I'm planning to go back to business school. Well, I get accepted to business school like January, this would have been January 2016. I get accepted to business school. 2 days later, I fly out to SHOT Show, and the guys from CRKT were like, "Hey, do you want to go to lunch?" And I'm like, "Cool, that's great." So during SHOT Show, we sit down and we go to lunch. And this was not uncommon. I'd kept in touch with them over the years when I'd been at
Right.
CRKT. And so we go to lunch, and they're like, okay, we actually invited you to lunch because BladeHQ is restructuring. The owners are moving out, so they're going to become absentee owners. And the guys I'm at lunch with are the new executive team, and they're like, so we want to offer you a job as the marketing manager.
Wow.
Would you be interested? I said, I have no idea. I'm planning on business school. I don't know. So anyway, we kind of went back and forth for a month, and it was the right opportunity. So I put business school on hold for a minute, moved back to Utah, and in April of 2016, I started at BladeHQ again as the marketing manager and took over a department of, I think it was about 6 people at the time.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that was kind of how I came back. I was planning to go to business school and head into. I was actually going to go full time,
Mhm.
just like take 2 years, rebuild my network, get out of the knife industry, just like start over basically. Because
Yeah.
I'd applied for a whole bunch of jobs all over the place, and it was just like, this is not working. So
Yeah.
it was just a pivot for me. And what I realized is everything I had wanted with an MBA, I wanted to move into management, I wanted to buy a house, and I wanted to be able to support my family better. And after about 6 months at BladeHQ, I realized like, wow, I just did all of that.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a really cool feeling. So I was planning to do a professional MBA program, but I was like, I just did it. Like I just
Right.
got what I wanted out of this. And so
Wow.
I bailed
Yeah.
on the MBA completely,
Yeah.
which wasn't really in the plans, but that's just kind of how it worked out. And then I spent 3 years at BladeHQ in the second run. So it
Yeah.
was fun.
Man, I mean, that to me, that it's an incredible story to me. I love
Thanks.
seeing, the journey. I love seeing the work that you've put in, and for you to be able to look back and see all the work you did. It's one of the things I love about marketing and creating content for companies is, you can look back and you can see all the stuff that you've played a role in, very visually, right? There's a lot of roles in companies that do a lot of work, but you don't necessarily see it. So it's always cool to look back. So that's got to be awesome for you to be able to look back. So
It is. It's really gratifying for sure.
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, God, with Blade, it's anyways. If you're new around here and you don't know, this is really just my excuse to gush over guests and how cool I think they are for, like, yeah, I don't know, 45 minutes or whatever. So that's what you guys are
You
hearing right now.
you are you Greg, I have to pay you a compliment. I don't know that I've ever heard a podcast host gush the way you do. You're stoked. It's really cool. It's
Yeah,
fun to listen to.
listen, and well, thank you. Number one, and number two, yeah. I mean, listen. If I continue doing this for another 10 years, and I've talked to all of my heroes more than once, I'll probably be a little bit jaded and a little less stoked. But um, trust me when I say, like, this is the highlight for me. Is like this, just getting to hear the story unravel, and getting to kind of share that story is super cool, and getting to know people. I mean, one of the most common things that I hear in these talks, and on Instagram and in the comments is about the community, and I think, the work that you've done, that you just walked through, how many ever years that was, 8 or 9 years of your journey in the knife industry, and my time, in the community. It's not possible without the community. So that's, like I said, I just like sharing what I share, and I don't know. Anyways, so again, this
Awesome.
is the exciting part for me. But
Nice. Love it.
so you've mastered Blade HQ, and their content and all that stuff, and so we're fast forwarding to, like, August of last year, 2019, right? And
Yeah.
I know now, you correct me if I'm wrong, you left Blade HQ, you now have a normal 9 to 5 day job outside of the knife industry. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that decision like? Like, leaving home, leaving I say home being Blade HQ, and, like, this
Yeah.
family that you've built over all these years. I mean, what was that like?
Um, it was definitely mixed emotions. I think if you back it up to 2018 is when and I'm funny. I feel like I'm this little bird that starts to outgrow its cage, and I'm like, cool. I want to fly, and
Yeah.
your wings are like hitting the cage as you try to fly, and for me, that's always been like a very almost tangible feeling of like okay, my work here is closing. And so August of 2018, I kind of had this epiphany that like I got to start unraveling myself from BladeHQ. And so January 2019, I stopped being in BladeHQ videos like cold turkey. It was just like January 1, I gotta pull the plug on this thing because I needed it to work without me. Like that was my goal. Like I felt like the first time I left BladeHQ, I didn't leave a system that
Uh-huh.
would be manageable by somebody else who hadn't been in the weeds on it. Like it just
Sure.
and I think in some ways it really like it. And this is not prideful. I think it's more retrospective. I did a poor job handing it off. It kind of fell after I left the first time.
Right.
And the second time, I'm like, look, one of my goals here is to leave it not just better than I found it, but almost like parachute out the back of the airplane and watch it keep going, doing circles around the globe, you
Sort of
know?
self-sustaining, yeah.
Yeah. And so January 2019, I cut the cord. I'm like, I'm off YouTube. I kind of just focused on the marketing manager side of it and training the team on everything they needed to do. And by August of that year, I'd found another gig and I bailed. And so, but the cool thing was like everything I had created, it was self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And that to me was one of the coolest feelings because it it's like this system doesn't need me. It's not about me. The system is self-serving. It works on its own. And so it's almost like a self-driving car, you know. It's like cool. Like this thing is working and it's going to drive across the country, you know. Um, and so for me, walking away from it was hard, but it was also like my work is done here, you know? And that is a super satisfying feeling.
Oh, no doubt.
It was really, really cool.
Yeah, you work on
Um,
putting something together that ends up being bigger than yourself. It's like, that's cool to look back on. So,
it is. It is. And I think the other cool thing is it let me out of this cage to be able to pursue my own ideas and really start to think about my own brand and what that is for me and what does that mean for the future and how do I kind of revamp my own things. And
sure.
that's kind of what I've been in the last year is using what I've learned to create my own systems. And it's harder than the other 2 3 places I've been previously because it's all me. It's me and my wife just kind of running weird stuff out of our garage, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta imagine, to some extent, yes, I'm sure it's extremely difficult because you're not coming into an infrastructure that gives you resources and this and that. But at the same time, you can also build it from the ground up the way you want and do what you want and do what is fun to you. So I mean, that's got to be important, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like the creative freedom is really, really liberating and fun, and it's um, I've thought a lot about pulleys the last couple of years. So CRKT when I was there, they actually came out with like this hunting
Yes.
hoist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, but only because it was in you talked about it in the same video that you talked about your injury. It wa and
nice.
anyways, it was that sort of like game prep
Yeah,
pulley
yeah, yeah,
wheel like hoist. Yeah, it was anyways,
yeah.
go
So it's this pulley hoist, and it was totally out of CRKT's lane. I think they discontinued it within a year, but I got to go to Texas and film, so that was cool. But
Yeah.
ever since then, I've kind of had this understanding of pulleys and the mechanical advantage of pulleys. And so, like the past year, I've been thinking about this idea of pulleys and how each wheel, each cog that you stick on a pulley creates a mechanical advantage.
Mhm.
And so the more pulleys you add to the thing, the less weight you have to pull up. And so especially like running my own business, doing my own thing, I've been thinking in terms of pulleys. So working with WE Knives,
Mhm.
I'm a cog in their pulley and they're a cog in my pulley. I don't know
Right.
how to make knives, Greg. Like I know what sells, but like if you were to put me in in a shop with a bandsaw and like some steel and an oven and a grinder, I'd come out with like missing 5 fingers and like you just take me
Injuries
straight to that.
and no knife.
Yes, yes. Like I don't know how to make knives. I'll readily admit it.
Sure.
Even like designing knives for me is very much it's a personal preference process.
Yeah.
And so being able to tap into WE's expertise, to be able to use them as a pulley to create more value in this community is really cool to me. On the other hand, we is using me as kind of a consultant to understand industry trends and what sells. So I've really thought about this idea of like call it collaboration, whatever, but I think of it as pulleys because
Yeah.
I only have time to be one cog. I work a 9 to 5. I've got family. I've got everything going on.
Mhm.
But how do I utilize other people for mutually beneficial lifting?
Yeah.
That's my theory of pulleys that I've been utilizing lately, and it's so different from working inside of a company and creating. When you're out on your own, it's like, yeah, who's going to take the trash out? You take the trash out.
Yeah.
Who responds to this customer complaint? Well, I do, or my wife does. We just kind of make it work. So it's really fun though.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that analogy, and I'm gonna I can tell like when I'm halfway through an episode, like I can tell when I'm gonna enjoy editing, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna listen to that whole spiel about pulleys again, and I'm gonna be like, God, makes so much sense. No, 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 100% though. I love that. That's a great way to put it. Gearing Up is sponsored by Novel Carry. If you're not familiar with them, their goal is to filter out all the noise and help you focus on getting quality gear at fair prices from really talented makers. Whether you're looking for knives, leather goods, pocket tools, beads, or anything EDC related, they've got you covered. Trust me. I've been a customer of Novel Carry in the past. I'm a huge fan of what these guys are doing, and they mean it when they say that this is EDC for the community, EDC by the community, the makers marketplace. These guys are crushing it. Be sure to go check them out. In fact, they've always got a monthly giveaway going on. Head over to novelcarry.com and enter into their monthly giveaway for a chance to win some awesome gear to step up your EDC. Again, that's novelcarry.com. So let's talk a little bit about your most recent sort of personal project, uh, Knafs.com.
Yeah,
Am I saying it right? I feel like I
yeah,
have a bad Texas Southern accent, so I'm Knafs. I want to, and
naffs.
I
Yeah,
also
no.
want to pronounce it sort of wrong. I don't know. Anyways, so
Okay, so nafs.com.
mhm.
It rhymes with laughs, rhymes with graphs, nafs.
Knafs.
Um,
Okay, got it.
nafs. It's a weird little project, and so kind of the story behind it. I mentioned August of 2018. Around that same time, I was starting to make a poster.
Hmm.
I had like been on vacation, and I just like had this brain dump where I just like started sketching out a huge poster.
Yeah.
And so my last year at BladeHQ, I launched this poster in at the end of 2018, and it was basically everything I knew about knives in a single place. And I'm getting ready to launch it. I've got it all designed, and I'm like, well, is this like a Ben Petersen design? Is this the beginning of a brand? What have I made? What have I done?
Right.
Like I've created a thing, but what do I do with it? And I kind of stepped back from it for just a second. I said, well, I'm not sure where this is headed, but maybe I turn this into a company. And I'm like, cool, let's do it. So created an LLC, started looking for a name, sort of that whole process. And at the time, we were making these Victorinoxes at Blade
I was
HQ that
gonna
had
ask
words
if
on them.
there was any
Yeah,
correlation there.
yeah. So this I haven't told this story before, but so the term NAFs is not new. It's that hashtag has been kicking around the knife industry for years. I think the first use was probably 6 years ago or something. Um, but we were doing these little Victorinoxes at the time, and we were just it was kind of like a Supreme style, the Supreme in their font and kind of labeling things. So we did like knife, knives, NAF, I think is what we
Mhm.
did. And we were having a discussion about should we put NAF on the side of it or NAFs? And this it was a light bulb moment. I don't have a lot of light bulb moments, but this was a light
This
bulb
is
moment.
one.
I was like, uh, we should do NAF. And I'm like, I want what if I called my company Knafs? And I went and looked up the URL. Nobody had the URL. 5-letter URL. $12.
$12. Oh man. I was
Yes.
gonna say, yeah, it was probably $12.
Because
Oh man,
nobody
that's
wanted it. It's
such
like this scruffy puppy at the pound that nobody wanted. And I'm like, sweet, I'll take it. And so I threw a logo together, threw it on the poster, did the first run of posters. It came out like end of December. I totally
mhm,
missed the holidays, 2018. Comes out end of December 2018, and I launched the NAFS brand in 2018. And it's it was a single product, single poster, and it just kind of started getting a little bit of traction.
yeah,
And I realized like this could be bigger than just a poster, and it could eventually morph into something hot and messy and just who knows what. And that's kind of the phase I'm in now. It's like this idea that I can create my own things. I can chase these ideas and kind of do it under my own flag.
yeah, yeah, and that's got to be liberating, frightening, all of those things all at once. Um, but I think you've got the added benefit of an audience that you've already sort of earned over all of your time in the industry. Um, that see something, and when you launched I remember when the poster came out, and I wasn't I don't, as a knife guy, I'm horrible at watching knife content on YouTube. I consume a ton of YouTube. Almost none of it is knives. And so I knew who you were. I knew BladeHQ. I knew what you guys did. Um, but this poster, I have one in my office. It is easily the most asked about thing, because I got a lot of junk in my office. But like, people will come in and they will just look at it and just stare at it and read it, and I'm like, hey, go do something. Get out of here. You're in my way. But I think you've built this audience that now, I mean, and not to rush the progression that we're making here, but you go from the poster to the blackout edition, which I need to get for the home office. It would look really good in here. I'm on your website.
Thanks.
But yeah, so you start with this poster. And so when you guys originally launched it, was it just on nafs.com, or was it on BladeHQ originally, or how did that work, like distribution
Yeah,
wise?
it was a little bit messy. So, uh, so Blade HQ, I'm not going to dig into kind of their history and dirt and stuff. Like every
Sure,
company has dirt, but they kind of had these challenges with people sort of starting companies within Blade HQ
sure.
and selling products on the side, and so they had kind of clamped down on all of that, and totally understandable. Like if
Yeah,
you're a
yeah,
business, like, and it's easy in this industry, you start seeing opportunities, and it's like you just I totally understand why they did it. So
yeah,
anyway, when I launched this poster, I'm like, look, guys, I'm not trying to like take any Blade HQ business. Like, I'm not trying to like whittle anything out of here. So I actually had a single page website that only linked to Blade HQ. I only sold it on Blade HQ until the day I left,
okay,
um, which was pretty cool. Like, actually, I take that back. I did sell it in Europe too,
yeah,
through Knives and Tools, but they were cool with that. Like, so I tried to keep the whole thing above board just because it was like, I'm not trying to, I just needed a creative outlet because I was just
yeah,
like, I was spreadsheeting all day long. Um, and I was just like managing people, and I just had like these creative ideas I had to put into my own practice. And so when I launched, it was only through Blade HQ. Sorry, a long answer to your
no,
question
no,
there.
you're good. Makes
But
sense.
I felt really strongly like I'm not trying to create a conflict of interest or anything. And so yeah, I didn't launch any other products after that. But yeah, it was just like that single product initially. So
So you leave BladeHQ. Um, you start your 9 to 5. You start nafs.com. You do the poster. Uh, one of the things that I was most excited to talk to you about, and we won't spend forever on it, but you designed a knife with We. You mentioned it earlier, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I know in looking at it, I know in watching videos where you talk about it, I know in reviews, I know in videos where you talk about your knife preferences that like this was sort of an amalgamation of everything you had seen and loved and liked and hated, and it was all just a mishmash of personal preference. And uh, so my curiosity really comes in. I'm always interested to hear about the process, right? And so, um, what was that process like? Like starting the conversation, going from a sketch on a napkin to a prototype in hand. Like what was that process like?
Yeah. So the pieces are actually really connected here. So if we back it up to the poster, so poster launched end of 2018.
Hmm.
And I had actually thought about this idea of designing a knife for a while. So I actually sat down with We while working at BladeHQ,
Hmm.
um, June 2019. I sat down with them at Blade Show and I'm like, hey, would you guys have any interest in making a knife that I designed? And they were like, yes, absolutely. So I was actually planning on the knife on the white poster to be my first design.
Okay.
Um, and so I sit down with We, they're like, absolutely, we would love that. Like, that would be fantastic. Um, and even though that knife, I don't have a lot of love for it at this point, it was kind of drawn for the poster specifically.
Right.
But they're like, we'll take it. I'm like, cool, it's drawn. Um, well, I went back to my boss at BladeHQ, and he's like, nah, we can't do that. That's got conflict all over it. It's got issues. And I'm like, cool. I'm not married to it, so I'll just pull out of it. I told We like can't do that. Well, I leave 2 months later, and as soon as I announced publicly that I was leaving BladeHQ, I get an email from We, and they're like, "Are you ready?" And I'm like,
The
uh,
time is now.
the time is now, and I'm like, yes, but I actually don't love this design at the moment, and so can I draw something else? And they're like, yes, but hurry, please. And I'm like, okay. So we actually went on vacation like a couple days after I left BladeHQ, and we go up to Montana, and my wife's family has a little place up there that we go to,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I got to design a knife, and it was kind of cool because it was actually it's the same place I started drawing the poster a year before,
Yeah.
exactly a year before, and I sit down, and it was like it was almost like one take, um, just getting it together as far as like what I wanted shape wise, simplicity. I started with like a block in my head. I did a lot of whittling as a kid when I was a Boy
Uh-huh.
Scout, and you always start with like this form in your hands, and you start to pull something out of it. You know, you can make shapes, and so in my head, I started with a block, and then from there, I started putting in the curves and the lines, and the I could almost like feel it
Yeah.
as I was drawing, and in the sense that like I knew what I wanted it to feel like in hand, and I knew what the blade shape I wanted, and I knew where I wanted the jimping, and kind of how I wanted the pocket clip and all these different things. And so it was really, I don't want to say it was easy, but like you said, it's all of these things I'd been thinking about for 8 years, like,
Yeah.
and carrying knives over and over, and like, what do I like about this? What do I not like about that? Um, and I'd kind of just, I could almost just feel it and just throw it out there. So
Yeah.
the initial sketch was easy. I took it home, threw it into Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, kind of fixed some problems on it, sent it over to We, and then they're magicians, man. Like uh, I basically am sending them glorified napkin sketches, and no, like no joke. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing, man. Like I know I can send them like thicknesses and like lengths and widths. Like I don't know CAD, I don't do CAD. Like I'd love to. I just this phase of my life is a terrible time to learn something so magnanimous as
Right.
SolidWorks. And so I just like throw these napkin sketches at We, and they're like, "Sweet, we got you,"
Done.
and like done, and all the engineering comes together, and it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship. So it's really really fun
Yeah,
in
man,
that
they're
regard.
they're a fantastic company, man. Their attention to detail, their quality control. just their commitment to putting out good products. So
Yeah,
I think you nailed it with the manufacturer, with the design, all that stuff.
yeah, totally.
So when
Well, and
you oh,
like
go ahead.
they're just really good people too. Like we just had a baby this past April, and they like sent a baby gift,
Wow.
and just yesterday they sent a bunch of masks, like N95 masks,
Yeah.
um, just like really thoughtful, kind humans, and that to me, like I just don't. I'm at this point in my life where like I like to work with people that I like to work with,
Yeah.
and uh, that hasn't. Sometimes you don't get to choose. In this situation, I get to choose, and
Yeah.
so it's really really fun to choose to work with people that are great. So
Yeah. So whenever and I of course did some digging. I was looking on the site, and I've got a couple other questions about the knife itself. But originally, I think your sketch had an axis lock. I know you're an axis lock fan.
huge
So
fan.
question being, um, I know you're proud of the knife. You have to be, because it's been extremely successful, and I've not heard a single negative thing about it. I haven't had the chance to check one out, but I've watched I don't know how many reviews on it, and just thoughts, and I see people posting them. Um, is there anything you think, I'm gonna, if I could go back, I'm gonna change this or that, or um, anything you wish you would have done or included or done differently?
Yeah. So obviously, I wish I could put an access lock on it. That is a trademark technicality in China.
Sure.
It's still trademarked, which there's nobody gonna enforce that. Like there are tons of companies that are making access locks in China or
Yeah.
whatever they want to call them now. But WE's legal team kind of dug in and they realized that it was still trademark. They said, we're out. We can't do that. And I
Sure.
said, that's fine. Let's do an access or let's do a liner lock. Um, the other things I wish I could change on it, just I wish it were just a little thinner in the handle, just
Hmm.
a just a hair. Um, other than that, though, I don't know. It just works. It looks funky, but it just works really really well. Like it feels nice in the hand. I don't know. There's not a ton I would change about it. Oh, okay. There's one little thing, but the design doesn't lend itself well to it.
Sure.
So so I use my knives for tripods, tripod mounts. Um, and if you have kind of like Spyderco's actually work really well for it because they have sort of a bulge in the where the spidey hole is.
Hmm.
You can use the knife as a
Like a
as a
flathead.
screwdriver, as a flathead.
Yeah.
When and it's just really convenient because you don't have to open it. You just do it that way. So I wish it had that capability. You can open it obviously and use the spine of the blade for that, but it doesn't have that
Yeah.
being able to screw it in without opening. But that's such a stupid little thing. Like,
If I have to pick one, no, 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 and not to make you pick apart your you know knife baby here. I listen. I know that you put a ton of time and work into it, and like I said, if I don't know if both colors are sold out on BladeHQ. I think they are, but I just went to BladeHQ beforehand to see, and I know the black one was showed sold out. Um, so that leads to my question of, when you're going through the motions and you get a prototype in hand. um Actually, no, let me backtrack. Before you have a prototype in hand, and before you really show off the design, I mean, did you have it in your head that this was going to be a home run? Did other people think the same thing, or what was going through your mind for that?
um, I didn't know it was going to be a home run. My wife thought it would do great, but she's the best cheerleader of all.
Sure.
And so, like, like, yes, I appreciate it, but I'm also like, I don't know. So I actually, when I got the first prototype, it was probably about December of last year.
Uh-huh.
Um, I actually took it over to the guys at BladeHQ and asked for feedback. Um, and they had a couple good suggestions. Just they suggested moving the jimping around. I said, no, I don't want to. They did suggest moving the pocket clip just a little bit, giving it a little bit more curve on the end of it to go in the pocket a little easier.
Hmm.
Um, but I think when the guys at Blade HQ looked at it and they were like, this could do well. I was like, cool. This is good.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that they didn't get it and be like, Ben, you know,
Good job, sport. Like they're
yeah,
pinning a blue ribbon on you, a Ben blue
yeah,
ribbon.
totally, man, totally. And it's funny. There have been people online that have said, if Ben didn't design this knife, it would just get kicked to the curb. And I think that's probably some of the like feedback that has like ground my gears the worst because
Sure.
I can understand where they're coming from. Yes, I have an audience, I get it, but my hope for this design and this was part of the design process for me was to design something that you could pull out 10, 20, 30 years from now and sort of have this timeless quality to it. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't say made in 1995 or 2005. It almost just kind of has this very timeless feeling to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I achieved that perfectly, but I think it's stupid simple enough that like nobody's going to be like, "Oh, that was clearly this era of knife making."
Yeah. No, I was gonna say it's got that sort of simple minimalism that makes some of personally my favorite knives really effective. I mean, I think of like the Civivi Elementum comes to mind. Anything from Ray Laconico or most things from Laconico. Just
I
those
love Ray's designs.
it's oh god,
Beautiful.
that's so nice. But just those super clean minimal lines, not too much. Um, it's borderline vanilla, but it's almost like that's a compliment, just in the way that it handles and the way that it looks and all of that stuff. So
Yeah. Well, and I think you got to look at like so this is another part of my design process is I sat and looked at data for 8 years, dashboards and dashboards of data
yeah,
on what sells and why it sells. So like especially at CRKT, you look around, like when I was there at the time, 16% of their revenue was coming from the M16 model. It was a 15, 20-year-old model, and 16% of the revenue is still coming from this model that it kind of put them on the map. But it's just a super simple design. The Burnley Squid, super simple design. Paramilitary 2, Benchmade Griptilian.
yeah,
The Benchmade 940 is probably a little more complex as far as styling, but pretty darn simple.
yeah,
Delica, Spyderco Delica. So that all of these brands kind of have this very, very simple design that keeps the lights on for them. And for me, I looked at Wii's lineup and I'm like, they don't have a Griptilian. They don't
right.
have a paramilitary two. And I'm like, well, try this,
Just
And
give
so,
them one. Yeah.
yeah, so I think my hope and not to like, not trying to put the banter on the same shelf as any of those knives, but
No.
I wanted to design something that could start hitting in that range for a company that
Yeah.
has historically been making sports cars, which is cool. But what about a simple working man's knife that
Yeah.
kind of plays in that same space?
When I forget exactly what Nick Shabazz said in his review about the design, but
Tall glass of vanilla is what it was.
it was one of those things where he was talking about like it's gonna be this specific audience, and I agreed, and again, I think from the looks, from the specs, I mean it's an incredible design. I think it's again, and you say, well, if it wasn't designed by Ben, I'd argue that that could be partially true, right?
Sure.
I don't know that I'd see it as much because I follow you, I follow BladeHQ, I follow I follow all these different companies. Um, so you have 2 or 3 or 4 points of exposure. Um, so that there's that, but at the same time, I think from a again, someone that spent years around knives and like you said is not a maker but is a consumer, right? And I think that's a really interesting perspective that some designers and some knife makers don't take into account, right? This perspective of the end user. There's a lot of makers that seem to put what they want to make first, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But this idea that as a maker, I'm trying all these things and doing all these different things because I think they're the best or I think they're the coolest. May not always be what the end user likes, and for customs, that's one thing. But for something like a production, I mean, I think you have to take the approach you did, where you look at like what's going to sell, and not just what's going to
Yeah.
sell because it sells, but what's going to sell because of the functionality and the usability and the ergos and the quality of materials and all of that stuff. So I think you did an outstanding job merging all of those lanes together with the banter. So my hat is off to
Thank
you.
you.
Not that you need my praise, but hey, you know what? I'm going to give it to you anyways.
Dude, you're the best gusher of all time, man. I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you. It's been, I don't know, somebody said the other day on Instagram it's like well deserved, and I'm like, I don't know that I deserve anything. I just have these weird ideas,
Sure.
and I can't sit still, and so
And now we
maybe
have
I
this cool knife.
yeah, like I can't stop, and so
Yeah.
I make
Well,
things,
keep
and
doing
and I
keep doing it. We like
thank you.
it. We're
I
enjoying
will.
it. So I've
I
got
will.
I've got just a couple more questions, and then we'll close this thing out. But one of the things that I am always curious to know when it comes to folks that are in the community, are there any, not to put you on the spot, if you can't think of anybody, that's fine. But are there any companies or makers or designers or Instagram accounts um, that are really sticking out to you right now? Within the EDC community.
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna go like big and then down to small.
Sure, that's fair. I like more than
I
one. That's fine.
I have loved watching Pete's pirate life
Yeah,
evolve over the past couple years. It's been really, really fun to watch Peter McKinnon like take these just off the wall ideas and just like the pirate coin with like 12 layers of packaging because I
yeah,
can. That to me is really, really fun and really cool. I
for sure.
enjoy what he's doing. Um, Kind of on smaller scale, I've really, really enjoyed um, what Will with Everlasting Ember is doing.
Yeah,
Um, he does a lot of those kind of Photoshop. He and Sam Raven,
right,
gosh,
right.
what
Sam,
I think,
Raven the pirate.
yeah,
Yeah,
Raven the Pirate. Yeah, those two kind of have a similar like vibe to me, where they're like disassembling things and
yeah,
photoshopping them, and like their creativity is really, really fun to watch. So I really enjoy them. And then I got to give a shout out. So one of my very
please,
favorite
yes.
Instagram accounts is Van verse Wild, V underscore or Van underscore verse underscore Wild.
Okay,
Um, Rich, he does this. He's in the Air Force, and he just does these like adventures that I wish I could do. Like he'll like take his motorcycle in the desert for like 300 miles,
okay,
and like he'll hitchhike through California, and like he's like on for a couple weeks with his job, like in airplanes. He's an airplane mechanic, and then he's off like motorcycling, and it's like that's cool.
yeah,
So it's one of those accounts, and you like learn things about like how mechanical things work, and it's not like high gloss at all,
sure.
but it's really, really cool to see where he goes. I kind of live vicariously through him. Like if I had not chosen this path I've chosen, I would be out there riding a motorcycle in the desert. Like
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
Oh,
kind of a
that's
weird
great.
shout out.
No, no, no. I just gave him a follow. I'm gonna check him out.
Do it.
Dude. So I can't thank you enough for taking some time out. I do have one question that I'm trying to end all of my talks. I feel like I've forgotten it with some folks, but the question that I want to end on is what are you excited about? Is there anything coming up? It can be life, EDC, gear, NAFs, doesn't matter. Anything that's exciting, Ben, at the moment.
Dude, so my sister just graduated high school,
Uh huh.
and we were supposed to go backpacking like 3 weeks ago, and I've been nursing this back injury, and so I've been I canceled the trip. I never cancel trips, like it just doesn't happen. But I'm
Yeah.
like I gotta pull out of this one just because it's not gonna work. But we rescheduled. We're headed down to southern Utah here in about a month, and I've got this truck that I haven't tried out yet, and I am just like stoked to go with my sister and just go explore some Indian ruins, do some hiking, maybe some
Yeah.
paddle boarding, some swimming. Stuff like that just gets me really, really thrilled.
Yeah.
I love adventures and I love planning them. I love thinking about them. I love like the process of putting the gear together and like I even love like cleaning up gear like after a trip, which is kind of odd. It's almost like this cathartic like uh, just like the trip is over and now I put
Closing
the
of the
gear away.
chapter, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm very excited about that. That's stuff like that gets me thrilled. I love doing stuff with my family and my little sis is awesome. So it's fun to sort of be thinking about that. So
Dude,
that's what I'm excited about.
that sounds amazing. So, all right, guys,
Wait, before you close it up,
go
Greg,
ahead.
can I ask you one question?
You certainly can. I'm an open book.
What knife did you carry today?
Today, so I carried the CRKT Squid.
I love that knife.
Believe it or not, I just got one for the very first time. I'd always put it off, but I found one with a brass flightanium scale. So
Beauty.
I'm a brass fan some of the time, and so I couldn't pass it up. So it just came in recently. So I took it apart, cleaned it, put it all back together, put a fresh edge on it, and that's what I'm carrying. What
Yeah,
about
that's
you?
awesome. I have been carrying a mini bug out for the past 2 3 weeks.
Such a good knife.
So I borrowed it from Trevor, who used to work at
Uh huh.
BladeHQ. I swapped him a Banter for a minute, and he's been carrying that, and I've been carrying the mini bug out, and I like it a lot. So I've got the white one,
Uh huh.
and I'm just gonna complain that it's white, and my grubby fingers have messed up somebody else's knife. Like I just
So when I had my
so-
white one, I had a white one as well, and I knew I was like, I'm gonna carry this for a day, and it's gonna be awful. So I actually disassembled it, um, and I spray painted the scales with like a high heat black flat spray paint. And then after it dried, I tumbled them forever and then wiped them down, and I was left with this really cool um, black and white uh, paint job, essentially. And I cleaned out all the crevices and everything, and it fit back together like a song. And then a couple weeks later, I got bored and I threw it in some red dye, and so then I had this red and black. Because there were remnants of spray paint anyways. So it was sort of this Frankenstein looking mini bug out, but it was pretty cool.
that's awesome, man. I love it. It's a great knife. I have enjoyed it. I think I'm kind of debating if I like the big one or the small one better. Um, I don't love the white handles, but
Yeah,
I like the size a lot,
yeah.
like genuinely.
When I saw it on paper, I thought, it's not that much smaller, but I mean, it is a significant enough difference that if you thought that the bug out was a little too large, the mini is great. Great
Yeah.
knife, very well done. I mean, the bug out was fantastic too. So
Yep.
they
Totally.
they started off on a great foot. Anyways, Ben, I can't thank you enough, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's been a blast. I can't wait to see what else Knafs.com does, and I'm looking forward to the Banter 2 with an Axis lock, and all of that. I mean, again, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you taking out time and being on the show. This was a blast.
Greg, thank you for the opportunity, sir. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Guys, if you are still listening, hopefully you are, be sure to go check us out on iTunes, Google Podcast. I say iTunes still, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher. What is we? I don't even know what I just said. You guys know. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, check us out. Be sure to leave us a rating, leave us a review, and follow Ben on Instagram, Ben_banters. Check out his work on Knafs.com. Grab a poster, grab a mouse pad slash teardown mat, or grab a WE Banter and show him some love. That's going to do it for us. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much. Peace.